Welcome to Soul Searching Space, a space to remember who you truly are, who you came here to be, and what you came here to do. To be crystal clear, going from black and white thinking to full color HD, working from the inside out, reclaiming your power, waking up to your inherent wholeness, aligning soul, heart, mind, and body. Hello, and thank you for tuning in. We are continuing the conversations of working from the inside out. If you haven't tuned into the previous episodes in this series, I invite you to listen as it builds on top of each other. Before we dive in, what is the distinction between our brain and our mind? The neuroscientific psychological way of relating to this is that the brain is the meat, it's the hardware, it's the physical. And the nervous system that we have, which took millions and millions of years to evolve, has a function. And its function is to present information. We deal with information all the time. Think about a traffic light. There's green, yellow, and red. But the meaning of red, the meaning of yellow, the meaning of green is not physical. It's information. So we have a distinction between matter that exists and is tangible. And then we also have information which also exists, which is intangible. So the information flowing through the nervous system, the motor systems are tracking our sensory system. Let's approach this, or let's withdraw from this. That's the basis of our experience. All of our experiences are made of information. They are immaterial. They exist, but they are not tangible. So what that means is that we can use our mind, the flow of thought, where we rest our attention, what we do with our feelings and emotions. We can use that because to understand the underlying neural processes that represents our mind, to actually change our brain, because the repeated patterns of activity leave lasting trace behind. We have the power inside ourselves every moment to use our mind to change our brain, to change our mind for the better. So how can we actually do that, change our brain? Enter neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is the ability of the brain to change or rewire throughout a person's life. The plasticity of the brain is not limited by age, but is much more remarkable in children as their young brain is still developing. The brain consists of billions of neurons. Neurons communicate with each other through a space between them called a synapse. This communication is made possible by chemical messages or neurotransmitters. A typical neuron can have thousands of synapses or connections with other neurons. Together, they form extremely complex networks that are responsible for all brain functions. Synaptic connections as well as neurons themselves can change over time, and this phenomenon is called neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is activity-driven and follows the use it or lose it rule. Frequently used synapses are strengthened, while rarely used connections are weakened or eliminated. New activities generate new connections. Changes in synaptic strength can be temporary or long-lasting depending on the intensity and reoccurrence of the signal the synapse receives. Our deep-rooted beliefs are formed during our early childhood years from what we see, hear, and experience around us, particularly from our parents, caregivers, and teachers, and more. These beliefs, their programming is often inherited from the environment we start out in. Just as we are more likely to be bilingual if one of our primary caregivers continually speak to us in 2 different languages, we are more likely to see financial success as easy to achieve if you grew up in an environment where that was regularly demonstrated. Neuroplasticity is essential for normal brain development. It helps create functional brain circuits and is basis of learning. This is why acquiring a new skill, such as speaking a language or playing a musical instrument, is much easier in childhood than in adulthood. But changes brought about by neuroplasticity can also be negative, maladaptive, and have unfortunate consequences, especially if they happen in childhood. Childhood traumas are more likely to have long-lasting effects into a person's life. Neuroplastic changes happen all the time, but their magnitude depends on the amount of activity the brain receives. More practice leads to more learning. Keeping the brain busy is the way to keep it healthy and effective. There is a principle in neuroscience called Hebb's law. It basically states that nerve cells that fire together wire together. When 2 neurons fire in the brain at the same time, they become associated with one another, and the neural connection wiring in our brain becomes stronger. What that means is that if you repeatedly activate the same nerve cells, then each time they turn on, it will be easier for them to fire in unison again. Eventually, those neurons will develop a long-term relationship, meaning that clusters of neurons have fired so many times in the same way that they have organized themselves into specific patterns with long-lasting connections. The more these networks of neurons fire and wire, whatever thought, behavior, or feeling or emotion it is, it will become an automatic, unconscious habit. So if we keep thinking the same thoughts, doing the same things, and feeling the same feelings and emotions, we will begin to wire our brain into patterns that is the direct reflection of our reality. With time, it will become easier and more natural, familiar for us to produce the same mind on a moment-to-moment basis. When you are in the midst of an experience, the brain receives vital information from the external environment through the different sensory pathways. As the data is processed, networks of neurons arrange themselves into specific patterns reflecting the external event, situation, circumstance. The moment those nerve cells connect, the brain releases chemicals. Those chemicals are called emotions or feelings. Nerve cells that fire together wire together. But the opposite is also true. Nerve cells that no longer fire together no longer wires together. If you don't use it, you lose it. You can even focus conscious thought and intention to disconnect or unwire unwanted connections. So it is possible to let go of some of the patterns you've been holding on to that colors the way you think, act, and feel. As you keep practicing, the rewired brain will no longer fire according to the circuitry of the past. Thanks to neuroplasticity, we know that the brain can form new pathways, and thanks to the conscious mind, we know the power of thought to cause change. The nervous system affects all other systems of the body. As we start to shed layer after layer, we can witness ourselves and we can choose to unlearn and relearn. This is really powerful because even if you feel as though you were born into certain circumstances and there are certain pain and trauma in your past, that doesn't have to be your destiny moving forward. The truth is we can grow, learn, and evolve from here. Do you keep firing the same neural patterns by living your life the same way each day? Every time you respond to your familiar reality by recreating the same mind, by turning on the same nerve cells to make the brain work in the same way, you are wiring your brain to match your conditions. This innocent response cycle causes your brain and then your mind to reinforce even further the particular reality that is your external world. The more you fire the same circuits by reacting to external life, the more you will wire your brain to be equal to your external world. As we become aware of our thoughts running through our mind, then we can see how repetitive they are. Then we get to see the evidence of those pathways of those conditioned beliefs. Which connections are firing to continue to make you believe the life you are living, the being you are being? The primitive brain wants what is familiar and safe. Because remember, the minute we start producing cortisol, we step back in time in our brain. The more scared we are, the more primitive we go. According to the negativity bias, the more negative we are, the safer we are. We have this structure inside us. It's very real. There's no way around it. We have these needs for safety and connection. I know I keep coming back to this, but remember, for most of us who have these conditioned beliefs, patterns, habits, and more, doing the work to rebalance our nervous system is necessary before we can truly change our deep-rooted beliefs. We want to unify the mind's intent with the body's responses. To do this, we must create a new way of being, thinking, and doing. The theory behind breathing is rooted in our body's autonomic nervous system, which is divided into the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system means that this system does its own thing. It's not asking us first, should I breathe now? Should I sweat? It just does it. It's autonomic. The sympathetic nervous system is the fight, flight, freeze, fawn. The parasympathetic system is the rest, digest, play, connect. One is survival and the other is thriving. They work in opposites. When one is turned on, the other one is kind of turned off. Nervous system regulation is something we are going to be doing for the rest of our lives, so why not start now? Until we learn to regulate and navigate what we are experiencing, we are not going to have a chance at reconnecting with our authentic self and discovering those deeper aspects of our being. So if you haven't already, I invite you to listen or re-listen to episodes 5, Moving Towards the Center, Cultivating Self-Awareness, episode 6, Moving Towards the Center, the Nervous System and the Breath, episode number 13, The Center, the Observer. Awareness and breathing is essential first steps. And also being able to breathe slowly and deeply increases carbon dioxide in our bloodstream, and this also has a calming effect on the brain. So we are telling the body and the brain, hey, I'm safe enough to breathe slowly and deeply. Remember, we are going for physical calmness and relaxation first, because that's the first stage of coming back to the center. First, we relax physically. We don't try to relax mentally or emotionally. We always start with the physical. So by relaxing the physical body with our breath, we start to break the cycle of automatic patterns. We need to understand that childhood trauma doesn't come back as a feeling, it comes back as a reaction. When that happens, and instead of letting a pattern take over, we can use the tools of breath and awareness and come back into the body and settle ourselves and take in the view of what is actually happening. So 80% of sensory information derives from sight. So closing our eyes and purposely go inwards is helpful as well. Since we are greatly reducing sensory data from the environment, less information is entering our nervous system and our brain waves naturally slow down into alpha state. We become less preoccupied with the elements of our outer world, and the internal world begins to consume our attention. Adults predominantly operate at the beta brainwaves. However, we can access alpha through mindfulness meditation. And this is important because if we want to access our subconscious mind, we need to change our brainwaves. Any process that changes your perception changes your brainwaves. Sometimes it can be hard to sit still and go inwards when we are overwhelmed. In those cases, we can go for a walk. When we are walking, our eyes naturally look from side to side, which relaxes the body and deactivates our amygdala. There's also the physiological sigh, which is 2 inhales quickly and 1 long exhale. Feel your feelings and acknowledge your feelings. Validate yourself and then move your body to release the energy which is looping around. what supports you. As we become more familiar with who we thought we were, our goal is to unlearn who we used to be so we can free up energy to create a new life and new way of being or embrace more of who we truly are. I invite you to reflect deep inside. Who do you feel called to be? Did something resonate with you? Who are you going to be? And what are you going to do about it? Thank you for being here with me. Thank you for your time and thank you for your presence. I look forward to being with you again. I am sending you so much love, and until next time, may you remember that so much of the challenges that you face in your adult life have to do with these stress responses that got locked in during childhood that you now have an opportunity to heal.